I came across a series of informations very concerning regarding the involvement of fashion brands with unlawful activities, including the infringements of human rights and the pollution of the environment. So my first reaction was to act against the rise of fast fashion. And finally, after 2 years of research and campaigning non-stop, I've managed to create an open platform, a virtual stage if you prefer, where we can gather industry leaders, where they can share their valuable insights, upcoming legislations, strategies, and anticipating new trends that will help the transition of the fashion industry towards an ethical journey. Today, we are launching the first episode of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashions webinars, and we are also planning a series of live international events. The aim is to contain and prevent the damages caused by the second largest polluting industry on this planet, the fashion industry. So, together with our partners and supporters, we are united and committed in a peaceful but very decisive fight against unscrupulous fast fashion brands, which are accountable for enslaving factory workers, spoiling the ecosystem of vulnerable sites. I'm talking about um, they are vulnerable from a political point of view. So let me just mention briefly the Accra market in Ghana, the Gikomba market in Kenya, and the Atacama Desert in Chile. So all these sites are sadly known as the cemeteries of fast fashion, just to name a few of the areas which are used as a textile dump for developed countries. So each episode will air with a frequency of 2 months. We will host notable guests. They will be chairing their own panel of discussions, analyzing in depth pressing issues affecting this industry, brainstorming. We will search, new solutions, and the aim is to inform as much as possible an audience of consumers and professionals directly involved with the controversial fashion world. So we love it, but it is time to remember that we just have one planet. Today, I'm pleased, actually, I'm truly excited to announce our very first keynote speakers, two remarkable professionals leading their own projects. But before we get on with the presentation, I would like to thank two guests which are joining us from the US. Dr. Leanne Rutkowski. She's an impact fashion strategist and also a best-selling author, so thank you for being here. And Professor Marianne Foggi at Fordham University. So I really thank you for being here because I know you woke up very early this morning at 5 a.m. So thank you for being here. So let's go back to our keynote speaker. So I'm really excited to announce the first presentation by Luz van Dijk. She's a brilliant climate change journalist and also a lawyer advising several international clients covering global climate litigation trends, and she also consults with lawyers who are involved with climate litigation. And Luz is based in London. She studied and lived in London, and she's the founder of Climate Code. Our second remarkable speaker for today is Rika Olli. Welcome, Rika. She's a brilliant, as well, professional. She's leading business model innovator, and she's highly skilled in tech commerce with a special focus on minimizing the environmental impact by extending the life of products. So she's also leading several international projects, and Rika is also based in London. So thank you very much for being here and for your time, and I will leave the stage to Luz. Thank you, Luz. Oh, and before we start, please let me just remind you to keep your microphone switched off during the presentation. And if you want to ask any question, you are most welcome to do so. So at the end of the presentation, we will go through your questions. So you can start type them in group chat. Thank you very much, Luz.
Thank you. It's a great introduction. I'm just gonna share my presentation quickly. Right. Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, yes. Great. Thank you, Luz. Thank you.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining today, especially if you got it really early. So as Iri already mentioned, my name is Luz. I have a background in corporate law before I moved towards the climate and environmental laws. I'm very interested in seeing how law, climate, and business all interact with each other. And at the moment, I'm mostly active in climate litigation across the world. And my section of this webinar will discuss how the fashion industry is shaped by sustainability regulations and the ongoing battle against greenwashing. So as many of you might be aware, fashion is no longer just about trends and style. It has really serious environmental implications. So I'll be looking at how new rules and regulations are stepping up to tackle these issues and how everything ties into greenwashing in the end. So I'll split my presentation into two main parts. First off, we'll explore the current landscape of global regulations focused specifically on the fashion industry. And then we'll zoom in on the recent push for brands to openly share their environmental impacts. And these transparency rules are really key because they help companies to be accountable and to encourage a shift towards more sustainable practices. And as we're all from different countries, I won't be zooming in on any specific regulation. But if you have any questions about specific regulations, I'll be really happy to discuss that afterwards when there's a Q&A or even after the webinar altogether. So the second part of my talk today will focus more on how transparency efforts are making it tougher for companies to engage in greenwashing, where they claim to be environmentally friendly, but more than they really actually are. And I'll give you a view of real world impact of these regulations and discuss how they help consumers to make more informed choices when they're shopping for fashion, for example. And finally, I do have to mention, because we're talking about regulations and legal aspects, that everything I talk about today is very general information, and I'm not giving any specific legal advice that you can apply to specific person or business. So let's kick off. So governments around the globe, you can say, are really introducing legislation specifically designed to promote sustainable practices within the fashion industry. And these regulations require not only transparency, but they also focus on concrete actions from fashion brands, such as reducing waste, using sustainable materials, minimizing carbon emissions. So in my view, we can divide sustainability regulations in the fashion industry or affecting the fashion industry into three main categories. The first one is the transparency requirements. Second, we have the sustainable targets. And lastly, we have consumer empowerment. And I'll discuss each of these in a little bit more detail. Yeah, so first off, we have the transparency regulations, which force companies to disclose details of their, for example, their supply chains or the environmental impact of their products. And this level of transparency is really aimed at ensuring that brands are accountable for their practices, but also to help consumers obtain the information they need to make a very environmentally conscious decision in their purchasing. So examples that I've included here are, first off, the European Union, which has the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which mandates that large companies and listed small to medium enterprises in the EU, they have to produce and publish standardized sustainability reports as of 2025. And the regulation really aims to enhance transparency and uniformity in sustainability reporting across all businesses. Then the second example that I've included is in the United States, in New York, where they have the New York Fashion Act, which once it's fully implemented, it will obligate large fashion companies in New York to adhere to really strict environmental and social standards. So companies will have to report on the annual volume, for example, of produced materials, on certain baseline figures, targets for greenhouse gas emissions, due diligence measures, usage of recycled materials. So it's really a very broad, impactful piece of legislation. So the second type of regulations that I wanted to discuss is the sustainability targets regulations. These are laws that really set very specific sustainability goals, such as mandating a minimum percentage of recycled content in products or establishing aggressive waste reduction targets. And the examples I'm using are from the EU, just because the EU is really publishing a lot of legislation at the moment, and it's affecting the entire globe because they're all expanding the applicability. So the first example is the EU's eco-design for sustainable products regulation. This regulation is still being worked on at the moment, but in its current form, current draft, this regulation will set requirements for product durability, reusability, and recyclability. And fashion brands will have to focus on designing products with a reduced environmental impact and increased circularity if they want to comply. Suppliers across the world will be affected by this because they can expect increased data requests from companies that are in the scope of this regulation. Then the second example that I said was the EU Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive. Again, there's a version of this law that's coming into force later on. It's not active yet, but it will be a very important law, especially for online commerce, because it addresses issues related to packaging and packaging waste. And it will obligate companies to think about recyclability of their packaging materials, the minimization of packaging, for example, use of reusable packaging, labeling. So a lot of, again, things to think about. And then the final set of regulations I wanted to show are the regulations that include consumer empowerment measures in their regulation. So what I think these are measures that are really crucial because they help consumers with tools that they need to make informed choices, and it helps them to hold companies accountable and accountable for their environmental claims that they're making. So the examples that I'm giving are, first off, the European Union's Green Claims Directive, which is very likely to come into force this year. And its main objective is to prevent greenwashing by making sure that sustainability claims about products or services are substantiated by clear scientific evidence and verified through reporting requirements. So the use of the terms like environmentally friendly or climate neutral or biodegradable, you can only use these terms then if they're supported by verifiable evidence. Then the second example that I said was the United Kingdom Green Claims Code, which is the UK's set of rules to prevent businesses from making very misleading environmental claims about their products or about their services. And it's really based on a set of principles that are really strong. So any claim that you make, if you're a UK company, in your marketing about your products, it has to be truthful, it has to be accurate, has to be clear, unambiguous. You have to include all relevant information. You cannot omit anything. If you include any comparisons to, for example, to other brands or other products, the comparisons have to be fair. And whenever you are promoting your product or you're making any type of claim, you have to consider the entire life cycle of the product in that claim. And then finally, again, claims have to be substantiated. So that's the same as in the EU. Claims have to be verified or verifiable. And the last example is from France, where they have the Anti-Waste for a Circular Economy decree. And this prohibits the use of vague marketing terms like environmentally friendly or biodegradable, again, for fashion products. And it will ask of brands to display certain details on sustainability, reparability, recycled content, recyclability, traceability, and all of these aspects of a product, and to display them clearly to the consumer. And I think these are very global northern examples. I didn't include many examples from the global south, but countries all over the world are really implementing their own advertising guidelines, including, for example, Singapore, India, Malaysia. So every country is working on something like similar like this, where they're trying to get brands to be more ethical in the way that they're branding to prevent greenwashing. So how does everything tie into greenwashing? To start off with, greenwashing is really the act of misleading consumers regarding environmental practices of a company or the environmental benefits of a product. So it's a very prevalent tactic in the fashion industry, where brands are often touting products as green or as eco-friendly or sustainable without really substantial actions to back up their claims. For example, a brand might advertise a t-shirt as saying it's made from recycled materials, when only a very small percentage of the t-shirt is actually recycled. And the issue with this is that it really undermines any genuine efforts towards sustainability, because it's very misleading towards consumers who are trying to make ethical choices, and it's slowing down the progress towards really true environmental improvements. So when the market is flooded with misleading claims, such as the claim about the t-shirt, it becomes really challenging for consumers to distinguish between what is a genuinely sustainable product and which products are really only advertised as if they are. So one of the most effective tools against greenwashing has been the implementation of transparency requirements within legislation, the ones that I've been discussing already. And these laws really compel fashion brands to disclose details about their supply chains, about the materials, about the impact of their products. And the level of transparency is really crucial because it reduces the room for vague or unsubstantiated claims. And when a company must disclose specific information, it becomes much harder for them to mask their unsustainable practices behind green marketing. So legislation therefore goes further than to standardize what sustainability really means within the industry. It will define the percentages of a product, of what a product needs to be made from recycled materials or to qualify as recycled. And regulation can set very strict guidelines on which products or which parts of products can be termed as organic, for example. So these standardized definitions, they really reduce ambiguity, for example, and they prevent brands from exploiting these terms to their advantage. And one major aspect to all of these frameworks, which is lacking in a lot of them still, is how they're being enforced. Because you can have a great regulation, and I can talk about it all day about how great it is, but if it's not being enforced, it's not really useful for anyone. It's actually might be even worse. So without enforcement, laws are just words on paper, and no one's really doing anything about it. So regulators are supposed to impose fines, for example, or impose penalties for any sort of non-compliance with sustainability reporting. And in my view, regulatory bodies should be tasked with investigating claims and taking action against brands that are disseminating this misleading information, because this not only serves as a deterrent against greenwashing, but it also helps to maintain a level playing field where honest brands are not undercut by those who are using these deceptive practices. So that's why enforcement is really one of the most important things in my view. So we're moving on now to my favorite part, because this is the litigation part. And I've included some examples of greenwashing action against fashion brands all over the world, and most of these are quite recent, actually. So first off, we have Canada, and this is a pretty big one, because a non-profit organization there is called Stand Earth. They filed a complaint against Lululemon, the athletics brand, and they're arguing that Lululemon has a campaign, it's called Be Planet, that the messaging within that campaign is misleading customers, because ever since they launched that campaign, Lululemon's emissions have only increased. It didn't go down at all. It's just getting worse. So this is an ongoing case. No court has said anything about it yet. So it's really interesting to see, though. The second one is in the United Kingdom, where, as I just mentioned, they have the Green Claims Code, and there's an authority there which is responsible for investigating greenwashing in the UK. But they have now created a contract with ASOS, Boohoo, and Asda, which Asda is a supermarket but also has a clothing section, regarding their company's marketing practices. And this contract really contains very strong commitments that these companies are making towards using ethical and transparent marketing. So they are really required to file reports regularly and to support any green claims that they're making at the moment. So these contracts are finalized already, and these requirements are in place at the moment. So then the third one is in the European Union, where, similar to the UK, the EU has asked Zalando to make a commitment saying that they have to provide clear information about their product's benefits, environmental benefits, such as, for example, the exact percentage of the recycled materials that are being used in the products, and they have to publicly disclose this. And they're constantly being watched now in the EU. So because they signed this agreement and they made this commitment, they're really being checked if what they're saying is true, if their claims are correct. Then we have one example from the Netherlands, where an authority investigated 10 really big fashion brands. And following this investigation, specifically Decathlon and H&M had to make commitments, because I think we can conclude that they weren't doing the best, these two brands. So they had to make commitments regarding their environmental benefits of their products and how they market their products to the general public. So again, really similar. It's not really legal action, but authorities are really stepping up to make sure that certain brands have to make commitments, and then it's much easier for them to actually pursue them in case they fall short of their commitments. And then the final example took place last year, where Nike was sued in the United States. And this is really a litigation case. So this is really a plaintiff. So it's not just an authority, but a plaintiff in a legal case who argued that Nike's marketing of a campaign, it's called Move to Zero, was misleading, because Nike is trying to show that they're moving towards zero carbon and zero waste, but it's not the case. They had a lot of data to show that this wasn't happening at all. It's still in court as well, so there's no judgment yet. So we can't say whether it's true or not yet. But for this moment, Nike is really being accused of unjust enrichment, which it's quite a heavy accusation, misrepresentation, and fraud. So these are big outcomes at the moment. So I'd like to close, because I've been throwing a lot of regulation and litigation at you, and I know that there's a lot of people who might have a brand or who are interested in seeing how they can have a proper takeaway from this that isn't really too scary or too legal. So I want to focus on 5 points that I thought were important for you to remember after this part of the webinar. Well, I think the key message is, of course, to always define sustainability very clearly in your messaging. So try to use standard definitions provided by regulations, or have a look at regulations that are out there in the world, because there's differences between different regulations, but they're never that different that whatever one regulation says is completely opposed by another. So you can use them to inspire whatever you're saying. So for instance, if you have a product and you claim that it is made of recycled materials, specify the percentage of the product that is recycled. Don't just say it's a recycled product. Second is avoid overstating your claims, because it's very tempting, I think, to market products as being the most sustainable option available, or something is a green product. But ensure that your marketing claims are supported by tangible facts, and that they comply with legal standards, because overstating can lead to skepticism and potentially even legal scrutiny. So this might occur even if your intentions are really good. You still have to be ethical and stay within the lines. Thirdly, I wanted to give the takeaway that you have to stay informed. So keep up to date about the latest regulations in the jurisdictions where you're operating. I know that there's a lot to go through, because even this presentation was only a summary and a very short one. But compliance is really dynamic. It's not a one-time task. So it is evolving, and it's always changing. But that also means that if you're making a small mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can still become compliant afterwards. So that's really important for me. It's scary, but it's very doable. The fourth one is that I think you should learn as much as you can from companies that are doing the wrong thing. So pay attention to established brands, such as the ones that I've just mentioned, that have faced regulatory warnings or penalties or even litigation, because these are not just cautionary tales about brands doing wrong, but you should see them as learning opportunities, in my view. So you can analyze what went wrong exactly and how it was corrected to avoid these kind of pitfalls. So if you look, for example, at the Lululemon case that I just mentioned in Canada, the plaintiff there, which is Stand Earth, they really in detail explained in their legal complaint which statement exactly they think is greenwashing, and then they explain why they think it's greenwashing. So you can really get a lot of information from these legal complaints, because you can see explained in a lot of detail why it's wrong and how it's wrong. So it's really interesting to read. And then finally, I would say, even though I threw a lot at you, don't be intimidated by the prospect of litigation, because especially for smaller brands, the cases that I highlighted and the warnings, they generally involved large brands, like really global large brands that have repeatedly ignored regulations and that have been really less than forthcoming over a very long period of time. So as a smaller entity, focusing on compliance and ethical marketing from the start, I think will significantly already reduce your risk, because these companies have just been doing wrong for so long, and they're making a lot of money off of doing wrong. So that's why they're being subjected to authorities or litigation. So I don't want people to be intimidated and to be scared to make any claims, for example. That's not my intention ever. So that wraps up my side of the presentation. If you really want to connect with me, I'm always happy to discuss anything. You can always message me, or after Rika's presentation today, there will be a Q&A as well. So I'm really happy to answer any questions, discuss with anyone, meet with anyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luz. That was very enlightening, your presentation. And the key points is that we need professionals like you helping fashion brands in this transition towards an ethical journey, and just helping them not to be cheating by claiming, by greenwashing, basically. So thank you very much. This is a really very effective presentation. Thank you, Luz. So as Luz was just mentioning, if you have any question, you are welcome to ask anything, any question at the end of the presentation. So I'm really pleased now to leave the stage to Rika only. Rika, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So Thank you, Louise. I think we got a very nice overview of the legislative frameworks. And what I wanted to do here was to kind of actually put ourselves a little bit in the focus and talk about consumerism and circular economy. Those are kind of topics that I am very close to, and hopefully kind of bringing this to a very practical level. So just quickly of my background, and so that you kind of understand where I am coming from. So I often say that I have this first part of my career with a very traditional commerce career. I worked almost 10 years at PayPal, e-commerce companies like Kismania, and also logistics with InPost, and focusing very much on this digital commerce and building better websites, faster payments, and kind of this one click that you don't even understand. You've shopped something, and this kind of on the European and global markets. And I think this was the first part where I started to see this thing that we kind of optimize for buying. Like we would look at conversion rates, and then at the same time, especially on a fashion, your return rates might be 40-50%, and that's not kind of considered a problem. And I started to feel a little bit puzzled with this, that this is really not the direction I want to be supporting moving forward. So back in 2016-17, I switched kind of from this corporate path and went on to entrepreneurship. I have been involved in 3 different startups, and all of this is very much about new types of business models. Could we actually do things differently? Conscious shopping, extending life of products. So Mendy was my last startup, which was kind of care and repair services platform. And just wanted to bring, I think this is like a little bit of my passion these days, that I really kind of see the value in going to the wardrobe and kind of like making something out of the existing clothes. And so currently I'm consulting at Mixi Center, which is a circular economy innovation hub based in London and in Helsinki. Currently, I also work very heavily on digital product passport initiatives, and a startup called Made By, specifically based here in the UK. And I do a little bit of workshops around circularity and circular commerce models, such as repair, resale, and rental specifically. So I actually wanted to take us to a little bit of a journey. This comes from a book called Citizen from John Alexander, and just to kind of reflect a bit ourselves, where we are as consumers, because I think I've been a little bit I find this quite interesting to think of us, our identity as a consumer. So kind of what drives our consumption habits? Why are we behaving in the way we are? Like we just went through a tons of sort of legislation of how do we interact with brands, how do we shop, and we need to regulate all of this. But kind of where are we as humans? So obviously, we come from stories that are being told to us and what we tell ourselves. So kind of we have this evolution where we come from subject-driven world, the king type of world where we were very much obeying. We were under command, and we didn't really have this citizen initiatives. Then in the beginning of 1900s, we start to see this consumer identity emerging. And actually, that hasn't been that long that we've kind of embarked to this journey where we are suddenly driving as independent individuals. We have values around material and kind of being in the world. We just kind of need more, and we need better, and kind of the growth is the driver we're going for. And then I wanted to bring this citizen thinking here. So could we actually see the world where instead of consumers, we would act in our societies as citizens? So citizens that have other purposes than the more materialistic ones, that participate, that create. And the whole framework of this is actually, like, I can share the book with you, and it's obviously kind of line of thinking that that is emerging. So the consumer story is cracking. We sort of have this pervasive inequality. I guess we can say that there are less people kind of starving and in absolute poverty, but at the same time, exactly like the legislation has been now building up, we've kind of created this structure that supports the widening wealth gaps. So if we don't just have to, like, everyone understands this, that fashion supply chains with these production, sort of we've externalized as Western societies, at least, like we've externalized these like low cost and low income countries production that we've kind of created for ourselves just to be able to produce big quantities with low cost. We have ecological breakdown. So again, very obvious to all of us here, I think. And basically, again, going back to the legislative, we need to bring that in now because we're in this mess. Fashion brands, they actually have to calculate for climate disasters that might happen in the places where they produce their goods. And obviously, not going into much of detail there, but we also have sort of epidemic loneliness and mental health challenges, which are all kind of, to some extent at least, linked to this consumer story that we live for. So you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, create a new model that makes the existing models obsolete. So what can be done? I wanted to bring, first of all, I kind of have two ways to look at it, or two angles. One is the consumption piece of it. So us as consumers, us as fashion sort of users, and then the other one being more on the business side of things. So I wanted to bring this sort of rules in terms of what means conscious consumption. So what is, like, if what would it mean for all of us to live within sort of planetary boundaries? And there's a very, very interesting study or work done by Berlin-based Hot and Cool. Perhaps you've heard of this. There's been like these sort of consumer or campaigns as well around this, which basically say that to live within a fair consumption space that you see here, the light green one, in terms of carbon emissions. So what does it mean for you as a consumer? And sorry, it's a lot of things on the slide, but basically if we take on the upper, like kind of the worst countries here listed, Australia, the gray button there is kind of where we are in terms of consumption, and the objective would be to be in this green space. So essentially, within these richer countries like Australia, Japan, United States, and the United Kingdom, we would need to basically reduce our consumption by almost like 80%, which is obviously massive, which kind of turns into sort of buying maximum of 5 items per year, 5 new items. So obviously there's a lot to do, and the shift is kind of I'll talk a little bit more in details in the next slide. What are the key things to make this shift? I just perhaps wanted to point out there, for example, a country like France, which actually comes out way better than someone like the UK, which is due partly to that actually that quite extensive legislative work that they've already done. So they kind of regulate for example, companies cannot dispose non-sold goods, for example. There is a lot more in place in terms of sort of recycling and services that also to some extent help the extension of clothing. So as you can see, the outlook potentially looks a little bit grim, but I think the study kind of shows us quite nicely what needs to be done, and that's always kind of encouraging. So solutions, or kind of what are the efforts that needs to be done in order for us to live in this within the boundaries, actually, and sorry, I didn't go back to say that what it means living in this green space is basically the world being within the 1.5 degree warming sort of framework, and we basically need these three things to happen, and by far the most effective one is the number of new items bought by year. So like getting close to this, you should stick to 5 new items per year. The second one, or the second most, or kind of needs to happen in parallel, is to go for more sustainable options, such as secondhand, rental, everything that helps to kind of helps to keep your wardrobe in use for longer. And obviously this is sort of, it feels very simple, but yeah, we're kind of living in this reality where the trend has definitely been the opposite. So the average lifespan is been sharply declining, and we're basically producing for nothing in a lot of ways, which is very wasteful. And the third one being the less carbon intensive fibers. So this is another, perhaps a big topic, not going into those details so much, but obviously the oil-based fabrics, they also are less or more carbon intensive in terms of production. So the whole infrastructure we've built around fibers and materials obviously needs a shift as well. So what does this mean for business? Because obviously, again, going to this consumer story, we have fast fashion, we have the businesses that drive on profit and drive for volume, but what could be the other way? So first of all, and this is kind of where I spend most of my time within circular economy. So the circular economy principles basically mean that we would manufacture and design for circular economy. We design for repairability, for longer life, and we kind of try to keep the materials in use over and over and over again. And obviously this means that we would have, in terms of business models, also these kind of business models that really enable this circle to go around. We collect, we sort, and at the end of the day, the waste that comes out of the circle is minimized. And this is heavy. I just wanted to point out, actually, from Louise's presentation, that yes, the other part of this kind of opportunity is the legislation, and this is kind of from the EU framework around eco-design for sustainable products and regulations, which kind of talks about all of these things around the circular textiles, the consumer, the greenwashing, the business model support. But I guess just to point out that actually the legislation doesn't address overproduction. So we don't talk about overproduction at all. So it sort of feels that and the shift, like the big shift that needs to happen in our lives, the way we buy, the way we consume, it does need to be driven by businesses and by us as consumers and as citizens, hopefully. So from overproduction to service models and profit distribution. So again, as a kind of circular economy advocate, I see such a big potential there. Already, if we take the fashion brands today, where most of their profits obviously these days come from that one single sale of an item. Now that we start to have the legal framework supporting like digital product passports, for example, the extended producer responsibility legislation, it should be a very simple kind of idea to drive for these business models that extend the life of products, because they also kind of enable the relationship with the customer being closer, being like allowing more touch points for your customer. So the business model actually makes a lot of sense. And then the second, from shareholder value creation to stakeholder value creation, because again, in our consumer capitalist model, we have very much this shareholder value growth and kind of value addition, where it's almost like we don't care so much about these other things. So this obviously can also be addressed. And just here as an example, taking Patagonia, who has the purpose trust that kind of takes the profits and make sure that those profits go towards climate change sort of fights and things like that. And there are a couple of, there are other examples, but I think as citizens, we can drive for more businesses that actually share these values. And obviously the degrowth is a little bit of a difficult word, but I just wanted to bring that there because I think all of what we've been saying here and kind of managing, for example, the business models that are more kind of circular, sustainable, they might mean that we need to favor local production because, you know, exactly this problem that we've kind of pushed the production out of sight, and with dumping, we have, you know, Iri was mentioning in the beginning the fact that we're kind of dumping our waste to these developing countries in Asia and also in Africa. So we have this on our hands. So we need to sort of think about that one as well. Like, how do we, as societies, as communities, how do we manage that kind of degrowth? Which, personally, maybe this is just my opinion, but something that we should be talking about, and we should be kind of driving as leaders, because this is obviously also a little bit the consumer citizen shift that feels like at least it needs to happen, that we need leaders who share these values, and we need leaders who also can take us there towards that type of vision. Okay, thank you. That was I was kind of running it now to meet the time frame and having some time for discussion. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Rika. That was really a very powerful presentation. Thank you very much. You really touched the key points also that inspired me to launch Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion, because one of the key points is the overproduction. We need to reduce the demand of really useless clothing garments which are not, you know, recyclable, and we don't need them. So we need to stop the overproduction, and we need to start extending the life of garments, so we can repair, we can reuse, and that's the reasons why we need more vintage shops. And also there, okay, we need to be careful also with the vintage shops. But thank you very much for sharing this powerful presentation, and we need to appeal to our sense of good citizen and our decencies, and stop really dumping clothing in other countries, because it's really awful what is happening in Chile, in Kenya, in Ghana. We need to stop this trend. It's really harming the population there. So we need to educate consumers, and we need to inform people about the damage, the consequences of buying a garment that we actually do not need. So the 5 garments rule per year per person needs to be enforced. Like Luz was mentioning, we need to enforce this rule. What's the point of having rules if we do not enforce them? So ladies, thank you very much for both your presentation, very powerful presentation. So I don't know if we have any question. Is anyone who wants to, join the debate? I don't know if Rika or Luz wants to answer to Ariana and Christina as well.
Yeah, I see there are a couple of questions there. So I'll just take one from the order, right? So what could be done to make consumers aware about the subliminal manipulation of AdWords, which contrast the circular economy? Maybe this, Louise, you might have from the legal point of view, what could be done.
In my view, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be done legally about manipulation of adverts in general. But subliminal messaging, I think it's something that's really difficult to regulate, right? Because it's something that is snuck into an advert or snuck into some sort of messaging that you're trying to put out there. And consumers are, of course, not aware of it to begin with. So it's an issue that extends beyond sustainability as well. It's just, it's another form of, in my view, of unethical marketing that shouldn't be done at all. So in my view, it shouldn't even have to do with contrasting it with the circular economy. It should just be regulation that doesn't allow subliminal messaging in advertising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's linked. Yeah, exactly. It's a greenwashing that we do need to.
Yeah. So we have a question from Christina, who is actually asking, well, that's a good point. We need to reduce the price of green products, right? Because a lot of young people, they don't have access to certain items because of the cost as well. And the question from Batman Musasia, what are some practical ways to slay the demon of overproduction? That's really a very good question.
I mean, that's spot on, I guess, and again, such a complex I guess, for all of us in this kind of in this sustainable circular industry, I think we just sort of need to drive these drivers. We have the legislative that hopefully, like for example, the producer responsibility legislation will already be quite a big one when it's enforced, because the moment when brands will be penalized for overstock, for example, in a real massive way, that can hopefully, because if currently, the problem that if there's no penalty for you to kind of, you don't have to care about what happens to your clothing, it's very difficult to enforce any other practices. So I think the legislation is definitely kind of one thing that gives this. But then obviously us as consumers moving a little bit more into this, like what we value, what we buy, how we act. But I guess there's no silver bullet here.
But that's why we need to get involved. Well, I invite Betterman and Ariana to switch on your microphones. And please, if you want to take part to the debate and you want to expand your question, you are most welcome to do so.
Thank you very much. My name is Betterman Simidi. Together with others, we run an organization called Clean Up Kenya. We are based in Nairobi. And our focus really is to do public-facing advocacy around different issues to do with waste. And in the last couple of years, we've been quite interested in the problem of textile waste, since many countries in the global south, they have become the involuntary recipients to a lot of second-hand clothing coming from all over the world. Let me just put this into perspective. In the last 6 or 7 years, for example, Kenya has imported around 1 billion kilograms of clothing, second-hand clothing, for a population of about 50 million. That's a lot of clothing. And so, we have been engaged in advocacy work to try to show the environmental impact of this clothing. Just last year, we collaborated with other partners in Europe to release a report and documentary called Ration, where our investigation was able to unveil that up to 40% of the clothing that gets sent to Kenya from the EU and the UK are essentially rubbish. And, we found for several reasons. One of them is the clothing, they are either climate inappropriate. For example, in some of the belts we opened, we would find winter cloth, skiing shoes, and so this have no use for us. We also found some clothing that are culturally inappropriate. For example, maybe a very tiny mini skirt that maybe a college student would wear in a hostel, but not walk with it on the streets of Nairobi. And some of the cloth were soiled and so forth. And so, just to connect this, what we are seeing now is that this overproduction of cloth, the second-hand clothing trade has become an extension of the fast fashion. That when the clothes, they are being overproduced, and people, they overconsume, they buy, so they don't stay with the cloth for long, and this cloth, they have to go somewhere. So you find out that the people who are collecting the cloth in Europe, for example, they might think that, okay, these clothes, they have some use somewhere. And so when we are addressing overproduction, we don't just have to stop at fast fashion. We have to look at the second-hand clothing trade as an appendage of fast fashion and overproduction.
That's very good point. That's very good point, Betterman. And we need to change the culture. And as Rika was mentioning in her presentation, as citizens, we should change the culture of buying and keeping buying, and learning how to extend the life cycle of garments and reusing I have clothing garments for 20 years ago, for instance. So there is no need for all, like I was mentioning to Rika a few weeks ago, I have my Dr. Martens, which I bought like 15 years ago. I got them repaired. And I still have them on. We really do not need all these garments, and we need to change the culture and stopping this horrible trend of using other people countries as a dumping, you know, area for our clothing. So there was Helga. Helga, would you like? Helga had a question, and Ariana as well. So would you like to join the debate? And Dr. Lien Til Rutowski. So who would like to join now?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I'm Ariana.
Yeah.
My background's
welcome, Ariana. Welcome.
Thank you. My background's more on the biotech side, so I look at biomaterials and alternatives to non-plastic materials. I don't know how many people follow the industry in this sense, but recently there's been a few large manufacturing companies that have tried to find alternatives, haven't had enough backing and funding to actually scale up the production of their alternative materials, which just is proving that the price disparity between the more fossil-based materials is just so hard to compete with. And if the industry isn't willing to shift because the legislation isn't pushing them enough just yet, is there going to be a scramble for these materials that aren't going to be ready in time because there isn't enough scale to back the production needed? So I guess there's this dichotomy between having enough biomaterials to get that demand in, but also trying to reduce the consumption side from consumers' perspective.
So who would like to answer to Ariana? Thank you very much for your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that's very true, and I guess linked to exactly these recent kind of lacks of at the end, finally, the commitment from bigger brands, especially towards the sort of big scale recycling. I guess again, there's probably, please do jump in if there's someone who has like a sort of something more to input here, more enlightening. But I guess what I at least feel that I've seen in the field is that maybe that model, or like there needs to be more, because it proves to be very difficult. The recycling, I think everyone at some point like jumped into the recycling thinking that, okay, great, now we have a solution. There were heavy investments by a lot of the fast fashion global brands to these facilities, which then hasn't really played out the way because those processes are very complicated, the materials are complicated, and that model hasn't kind of played out so well. Personally, I'd still continue being sort of optimistic because I think that kind of created still some sort of innovation within that industry. So we do see, or at least I do see startups, or I do see sort of then other solutions being funded to some extent. But I guess we kind of hit the wall in a sense that we have to come to a realization that the recycling itself doesn't solve the problems. Like the reality is that as long as we keep especially these kind of oil-based materials, it's very difficult. And again, yes, the commitment from those bigger brands have not really been there either. So very kind of, in that sense, complicated matter.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anyone else who feels like what would be the vision. How do you see, perhaps, Ariana,
yes,
how
please.
do you see that going forward from your point of view?
Yes, please feel free to join the debate. In the meantime, I see another question from Helga. In Germany, there is an initiative.
No, it was not a question. I just wanted to add that in Germany, we have since 2019, I believe, an initiative. It's called green button. In German, it's grüner Knopf. It's green button. It follows an initiative which exists since 1980s, I think, green points. So to give a special certification to green products, it can be in food or it can be in any industry, but a green button has been created especially for the fashion industry. But also the problem is it can be exploited as well for greenwashing. So I don't say it has been, but there is also this danger in some kind of way. But on the other hand, what is interesting, it has been created so by the government. So it's by the German federal government. So it's a very important initiative. I think there are, meanwhile, 27 companies who have this certification, though there is an awareness, and it's fashionable to be green in Germany anyhow in any way. But the problem is sometimes it can backfire as well. As you say, then many companies will try to greenwash. So I just wanted to mention this initiative, that's all. Following Louis' first presentation, I just want to say that we have something in Germany.
Thank you.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for sharing, Helga.
Yeah.
We have another question from Dr. Liantil Rutkowski. Thank you very much for joining us today at such early hour. And the same goes for Professor Marianne Foggi. She's also joining us from the US. Thank you very much for your bravery. You woke up at 5 a.m. So, Dr. Lian, thank you very much for your. Would you like to take part to join the debate and ask your sharing, live?
Right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I think I've gone through a whole pot of tea just since 5 a.m. So I'm starting to get my mojo here. I just wanted to make a comment. It drives me crazy sometimes when I hear companies around the world that have worked to position themselves as the gold standard, Stella McCartney, Patagonia, and in the end, they're not so angelic as I would say. Patagonia does produce this would drive Betterman crazy because they use the PET bottles. They advertise to the general consumer when they hear that they're going to be wearing a fleece jacket that's made out of plastic bottles. They're so excited. It's just, a feather in their cap, and they're very excited that they're contributing to these wonderful environmental causes and so forth. But in the end, when you take that bottle, it's much easier to recycle a bottle than it is to recycle a plastic jacket made out of fleece. And so, you have a jacket that'll probably take 400 years to deteriorate in the landfill, and it'll take 10 minutes to get this bottle pop into something else. So it just drives me a little crazy. And I personally have met with Rick Ridgway from Patagonia. He invited me to spend time in California at their headquarters. So, I have a great understanding that they have of the great company they are in a sense. But after spending time there, one of the mantras was, "We're not perfect." Well, no kidding. So, but they have the money to put into these environmental efforts, as Ricky was talking about. And it's like, don't watch what one hand is doing while the other is doing something else. So if you look back, and I don't forget things very easily. And I remember back in 2016, there was a supply chain issue with Patagonia and Stella McCartney. And what happened was, I'll be darned, there was a farm where they were sourcing their wool, and they were stripping the pelts off of the animals while they were still alive to get a better result from the wool. So what happened was, and this is, I think, a question for Luce, Luce, I hope I'm pronouncing your, what happens, it's like it's an am I bad moment, but in the end, what they were doing was crazy. So Stella, who is another, the Green Carpet Challenge, and Patagonia, the other gold standard, are both using the same supply, wool supplier, and this is what was going on. So, I'm sorry that I'm being so graphic at such an early time of the day, but essentially what happened was nothing. They just said, oh, my bad. Oh, we'll never use this supplier again. Well, why didn't they know that ahead of time? So it's, where is the accountability? And it's still, if you look at the Birkin bag, right, Hermes, it's the same, right? So I was very encouraged to hear Luce's, a discussion about, the idea that the regulations are starting to become more, prevalent. We're taking a better look in Betterment, especially, we talk about the recycling. I guess I'm getting off on a tangent here, but it's just, when you have a company like Shein who produces 10,000 pieces an hour, that's their idea of, hitting the streets running. And we talk about, catching up and doing, where does that stuff go? It goes to Betterman's neighborhood. And it's happening so fast and furiously. With us just talking about this now, it's all stacking up. So I personally have always felt that it's the supplier, the producer, and the key is the legislation. And that, I believe, has been lacking. So I'm very happy to hear that, I think all of us need to really keep an eye on that and support it. I have started, jumping on the wagon here in the United States. I've been working at infiltrating the United States Congress from one coast to the other with anybody that'll listen. We'll go from there. But I just wanted to make a comment about Patagonia. It just drives me nuts. They are, in so many ways, they do good things, but it doesn't mean they produce goodly. So,
Yeah,
and
that's a very good
great.
point. I'm sorry, that's a very good point, Dr. Leanne, and we need to denounce more of these brands, and we need to be very vocal, and that's one of the purpose of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. So on this platform, we need to denounce, and we need people to we need to inform buyers what they are buying. And I remember this movie years ago. It was called Blood Diamond, but it's not only Blood Diamond. We have now blood on garments. So, and we need to remember that. Obviously, we need to be more conscious when we buy and we do our shopping. I don't know if there is anyone else who wants to join the debate or ask any questions. No. Okay. Well, in this case, let me thank you very much. This was my first episode of Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. I thank you very much for your effort and for being here today. A special thanks to Luz Van Dijk and Rika Olli. They are two great professionals, and they took their time to be here today. I hope to see you soon on the next episode, which will happen in 2 months. I will obviously inform you about the contents and the keynote speakers. And afterwards, feel free to contact me, or if you have more questions, or if you want to get in touch with Rika and Luz, their profiles are available on LinkedIn and through Enjoy Vintage Sustainable Fashion. Thank you very much. Thank you, and have a great day. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Hey, Rika and Luz. Oh, Emil. Good morning. You joined at the end. Please switch on your microphone, Emil. You can switch on your microphone. Are you on? I'm so sorry you just managed now. Good morning, Emil. Thank you for trying.
I'm really sorry to be attending late, but I was trying to get in for some time, and then saving the world takes some time. So I've been doing some things in between. Hopefully, I can see a recording of this
Yes.
conversation, because I'm really interested in what you have to say, and also meeting you guys is important, because then I know that I will be in time, and I promise you that I will be in time next time.
Of course, there will be another episode in June. And I will be very happy, to connect with you and discuss further. But thank you for making the effort. I really appreciate it. Just, you came in and say hi. It's already great. Thank you very much. I mean, we had a great discussion about it. It's recorded, and I will share it on LinkedIn and all the other channels. Thank you very
so
much for being here. Thank you.
And if anyone is in Berlin, 15th or 16th, 17th of May,
Yep.
I'll be there at Green Tech Festival. So if you're in Berlin, please, let's try to meet up.
Yeah, and just send me all the information, and I will share it on my channel as well, on my platform.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Emil.
Eureka.
Thank you.
I'll drop as well.
Bye.
Let's connect on the side. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Super.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Grazie ragazzi, grazie a tutti. Ciao.